Good evening. This is Defacto Review, a weekly analysis of Mongolia's latest political, economic, and social issues by economist and columnist Mr. D.Jargalsaikhan.
Good evening.
And I'll be your co-host, Tikshirult. Today's topics are on the integrity of Mongolian elections, the annual joint military exercise with Russia, and the investigation of the railroad project between Zumbaying and Khashoggi. Retired politician and political analyst Mr. Batbayr, also known as Babar, published an article that raised a lot of questions about the election system. A recent poll on the desired qualities of a member of parliament found that voters most favored fairness as a trait in a member of parliament. The second was patriotism, but the poll found that for a candidate to be a law-abiding citizen came at 15th place in terms of importance, which shows that it's not expected by a voter all that much. Another question on the poll was whether voters would sell their votes to candidates, and 10% of voters said that they would receive the money and vote for the candidate. Another 70% of voters said that they would take the money but would make up their own minds. However, a study of focus groups showed that a majority of the people that said would take the money and make up their own minds would actually vote for the candidate that gave them the most money. So Mr. Babar has concluded that voters themselves do not care much about being law-abiding citizens. He also listed all types of election fraud, like recorded instances where people in charge of counting ballots back in the day for elections were bribed to change the results of elections. Another issue is the inconsistency when it comes to our electoral system. We have had proportional systems, majoritarian systems, and mixed systems, and because we have such an inconsistency in our elections, the results vary. So the article notes that the electoral system selected for a specific election will more or less determine the result before the votes are even cast. And Mr. Babar raised many questions about the integrity of the nature of elections in this country. Do you agree with the points that were made in the article?
Mr. Babar raised really important issues. He is a very well-known historian, author, and his words really have a lot of weight in the society. That's why his article about this election system, in particular frauds, the several important issues with particular cases were raised. Mm-hmm. Some of them, like for example, following. He said that he was always critical about Mongolians' people's mentality, and he said sometimes very harsh, tough words, including, for example, these people are ready to sell their motherland for money. That statement he made, for example. The other interesting and unfortunate cases of election frauds are brought in this article. That's why we highlight, I think, this week that some of them. For example, in Dornot Aymak, after an election, the person who counts the votes himself was filling thousands of votes, and it appeared to be after he did not get money for that wrongdoing. Then he made a statement in the newspaper that he had himself filled thousands or so votes. So what the election is this? Mm-hmm. The other one is some pre-filled votes were already with this pre-filled votes ballot box was replaced, the original one, and the real ones later on found in waste dump area, for example. The other case in Selenge-2022, for example, an officer who was supposed to count this ballots, he was running away with the box by motorcycle, for example. And even worse, in 2004, during the counting of all votes, the electricity power was cut off And it was allegedly made by the intelligence agency. Nobody had responsibility afterwards. And also Babar says that in 1997 presidential election, the Russian experts were involved, etc., many frauds in connection with election and around are brought to the attention of the public, which we from time to time forgot. And we need to, as society, pay attention.
So, Mr. D.Jargalsaikhan, what steps do you think should be taken to limit and to stop the electoral fraud in Mongolian elections in the future?
There are so many things to be made. First of all, not only about the election, but about all cases, we need to have a strong enforcement of laws. Mongolia is not lack of laws. We have several hundreds of them, but we are lacking the enforcement of it, first. Secondly, Mongolia should rid of the so-called politicians' immunity. When politicians, parliamentarians have immunity, and they are protected by the state for their wrongdoing, and which are many cases now at the court, but never ended. For years it goes on. The third is to hold accountable all politicians involved in corruption. We should make also the anti-corruption agency stronger. It is understaffed now. The other thing we must do it to make a transparent political party financing, which is the main source of corruption in Mongolia, and we cannot rid of it for years in spite of all conversations, talks, requirements. It is never ending. So political party financing is so important. Lastly, I would say to change Mongolian election commission into electorate commission, where civil society, representative of a well-known non-political part of society, to be represented on the board. These are just a few, but the first necessity steps to make electorate fraud less in this country. Otherwise, our democracy is becoming more and more fragile when you filled with this all fake votes. Fragile when you filled with this all fake votes.
A story that caused a lot of uproar in the Mongolian media lately was of Russian armored vehicles on the roads of Ulaanbaatar. This, of course, took a lot of people by surprise, as Russia is a country that is currently in active war with another nation. However, the foreign minister clarified that the troops and equipment are here for an annual joint tactical drill called Selenge. So this year's edition is Selenge-2022. And an estimated 300 vehicles and equipment, along with about 1,000 troops, are in Mongolia. But I have to note that this number is not confirmed, as the military has not made any statements on the exercise so far. Foreign Minister Batsik has made a statement to the public that this edition of the annual exercise is simply following up on prior agreement with another nation, as we've been doing it for many years, every year. And however, people online have been very vocal about having Russian troops within our borders, and saying that we should not be meddling with Russia while it's at war with another one of its neighbors. The Democratic Party has claimed that having these troops in Mongolia violates the law on housing or allowing the transit of foreign troops. And recently we've received a Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, and that was met with protests. And a few days ago, Mongolians woke up to see Russian armored vehicles with no explanation from the authorities. Mr. Jargalsaikhan, do you think that this year's exercise should still go on as planned, considering the Russia-Ukraine situation?
Well, it's almost on now. I mean, the public just knew when the armored vehicles were driving in Ulaanbaatar city with a Russian flag, and people got really confused. Many of them are shocked. And in fact, this is Mrs. Batsetsel, foreign minister, said it is another planned military drill, and which they do every year with Russian, and this time Uzbekistan, Belarus, and other couple of Russia-connected countries are coming to this drill. Last year, the same drill was in Tawon-Tolgoi in spite of COVID-19. So Tawon-Tolgoi, there is a military polygon nearby Ulaanbaatar city. Tawon-Tolgoi, there was that drill took place. This time is really not good timing. As you said, it's the nation involved in aggression, in the war in Ukraine. Their soldiers, I mean, the people, they would like not to see that. But that's what's happening. Mongolia also had the same military drill with Americans. It's called Han Quest, and they do also every year. Mongolia do all this military drill just for because we are one of the per capita largest peacekeeping forces in the world, and many of our Mongolians in this conflict, conflict area and countries. But this one, when Russia is in the war, really raised a lot of concern among Mongolians. And according to the Democratic Party, the opposition party, Secretary Unurbayar, he said that this event shows that we are standing on the side of the aggressor nations. We should not do this. The ruling political party, People's Party, is behaving like a puppy of Russia. That's what he said. So really, many Mongolians now understand how fragile, how we are concerned and afraid of the military forces of Russia, who is now in the war. So people are worried about this fragility. And in particular, the Russian military war equipments are not itself a surprise, as a Mongolian army is fully traditionally equipped with Russian military equipments. But this time this war is really surprised all Mongolians. Plus, also all Mongolian military used to be trained in Russia, still now being trained. So, and probably many people think that we need to reconsider that training of our military in Russia. Particularly this when the car was, some military armored vehicles were driving on the road. It was again very shocking for Mongolians.
With the spread of the video of armored vehicles going through the city, a remark was made on the internet where the user said that they would be stuck in traffic for 3 hours. The Russians would get to Ulaanbaatar and get stuck in traffic. So I thought you'd find that amusing. Our next topic is about the railroad projects. Prime Minister Oyun Erden has tasked the authorities with the duty to investigate the delayment of Zungbaying and Kashun-Sohat railroad project. The project, which was approved with a budget of $250 million, was delayed between 2008 and 2019. The authorities, more specifically the Ministry of Finance, the Independent Authority Against Corruption, and the National Police Agency are to estimate wasted funds and investigate the people in charge of the project. The project was to be completed well over 10 years ago at a length of 267 kilometers. Mr. Jargalsaikhan, would you please give our viewers some more information on the history of this project?
This is very long-awaited decisions. Mongolian public is asking what happened to this project, why we have so many delays, when the Tavan Talga, one of the largest coking coal reserve in the world, 7 billion tons of it, was sailing the coal to China, and it's 230 or so kilometers to the Chinese border. On the Chinese side, there is already a railway system, everything. But from this Mongolia, we were planning to make this railway for many years, over 10 years. Actually, 10 years ago, the private company, MCS, was ready, and they raised the fund already to make that railway. Then it was a political conflict inside our ruling parties and all the elites, Mongolian, and they were against that. And they were, well, particularly I want to mention here Mr. Ex-President Batpolga, who was at that time Minister for Transport and Road and Transport, and he was showing himself a particular program, TV program he owns on TV station, and a program in which he showed how Mongolian natural resources are taken by China, how if we make a narrow gauge, Chinese gauge railway to south border, the Chinese tank will come directly to the Ulaanbaatar city, etc., etc. Very well-made documentary that scared people to the death, and they were all against the narrow gauge railways. You know, in Mongolia in the north we have a wider range and gauge of railway. In the south, again, we have the wider gauge now. So Mr. Batpolga at that time opposed the project that connects Mongolia with railways with China, other than the current existing only one transit line of railways. It's 1949 made in between Russia and Mongolian governments, and this railway is now owned by these two governments. It's called UB Railway, and only one transit line in between Russia and China, and the other want to make this railway from Tavan Talga to the south. So that project was stopped. In spite of the plan and money, the government was especially put for that project. And finally what happened was, again, Mr. Batpolga, when he became president, somehow they changed the law, because the law was before the railway gauge can be, industrial railway gauge can be different. That was the law, and suddenly that law was changed, and he, without tender, selected just one company, Bodhi International, which they have made already this railway. Now our 230 kilometers railway is already made, but not yet connected with China. And the public has no clue how much money was spent, from where, and what was the conditions of that construction of the railways, who will pay, etc. And I think that's one of the reasons why the government of Mongolia had decided to make an investigation. And the last week the government made decisions to investigate what is the reason why this important project is postponed for more than 10 years. The second reason, also very interesting, I think it's another corruption cases. According to the Prime Minister Oyun Erdin, there are parliamentarians, even current incumbent parliamentarians, who have been benefiting from the price change differences at the mine site. It's around $60 per ton. Then after 230 kilometers transport at the Chinese border, it is becoming 2 times more expensive. So basically, the group of politicians are benefiting from that differences. And according to the Prime Minister earlier statement that if that mafia is finished or stopped, then the GDP of the country will be increased twice, he said. And after that, there was for quite some time silence. And now that decision is coming to investigate what's happening, why that postponement, why such a long delay happened. So far, we believe that it was for the benefit of few politicians at the cost of whole Mongolia, whole Mongolian people's living standard. But the issue is now very interesting. Whether this Prime Minister will succeed or not on these two corruption cases, Mongolians will see how much we are resilient against this corruption things. But I'm afraid of this Prime Minister facing a lot of challenges, political challenges, not only from the opposition party, but also a lot of colleagues from inside of own political party. Mm-hmm. So it is really a matter of justice. Mm-hmm. And if this Prime Minister will lose, and they may replace him with own people who would please them. So we will see it's very important decisions of the government to investigate the case. But I'm not sure today whether we will see the result or not.
That is all for this week. This has been Defacto Review, a weekly analysis of Mongolia's latest political, economic, and social issues by economist and columnist Mr. D.Jargalsaikhan.
Thank you very much for staying with us. See you next week.